Cool.
I can say the opening prayer.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Our dear Heavenly Father, we're so grateful to be able to get together as a group and discuss the things that we have been learning in this class. And please bless that thy Spirit may be with us, that as we discuss the things we are learning, and bless all those who are traveling this time, that they may travel in safety. And we're grateful for the time of year and for the time that we can reflect on thee and to serve others. And please bless that we may have safe holidays and everyone may enjoy their families this holiday season after finals. And we love thee. We say in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Cool. Thank you. Before we get started, is this our last week meeting or do we meet next week also? Does anyone know?
This is our last week.
Okay. Cool. So before we get into the questions, is there anything that anyone wants to talk about specifically about other reading or assignments that we had? All right, we will just go ahead and jump into the questions then. So the first one, it says for chapter 8, building a movement, how do you think Christians can execute the following suggestions? 1, Christianity needs to be present, a case for biblical sexuality that is appealing and that engages the best of modern thought. 2, develop ministries for those who experience same-sex attraction and gender identity conflicts. And 3, defend religious liberty and help conscientious Christians understand how to bear witness to the truth when a radical sexual agenda has been a non-negotiable public policy. And 4, we need to live out the truth about marriage and human sexuality.
One question, what does it mean to develop ministries? Does that mean like support groups or what, or just like help, like people who support them?
It's a combination of two different things. It's not only support groups and people who can help them and assist with them in understanding what they need to do or how they need to be living. It's also just developing ministries, period, that actually preach that these are the way things are supposed to be and are trying to get the word out there that, yes, marriage is for a man and a woman, and these are the types of relationships, as opposed to the way the world is now, where as long as it makes you happy, go do it.
Sounds good, Emily. All right, anything else? Any other thoughts on that?
I thought for me the easiest one was, well, to live out the truth about marriage and human sexuality. I don't know if that's necessarily the easiest thing to do, but it seemed to be like the thing that I could do the most. Like just show a good example of a happy marriage to my children and grandchildren. Since I am divorced, I know that I thought that sounds kind of hypocritical, but my second marriage is much happier and more like it should be. So I think it's important just to show that to people around us, that there can be happy marriages and successful marriages and people that sacrifice for their family.
I like that. All right, anything else before we move on? All right, so question 2. Do you think the United States will ever change their view about the redefinition of marriage?
I think that Pandora's box has been opened and we're never going to get it back. I think that there may be instituted, like they talked about last week, covenant marriage or a different type of marriage where it's actually not a civil union or a marriage in a state function, but even redefining it doesn't change what we know it is. So yeah, I don't think that the pendulum will ever swing back, because there's too many people who want this, and we're never going to convince the people who want to eat the marshmallow now that it's better to wait till later and get 2 marshmallows.
Yeah, I agree with you.
I feel like I agree with Andre. I don't think it will ever be able to get that back. And I think that there are several reasons why. I think a lot of it is the government and public officials wouldn't really have that, and especially the people on the left who are very radical. I feel like there would be so much like persecution and a lot of riots that would come up that I don't know, like, obviously it would be amazing if it could be reversed, but would it fighting for it to be reversed really make it happen, especially with all of the radical people? Like, is it worth it? I think it would be to put up a fight, but I don't think that the end result would change it.
Yeah. I would be interested to see the reaction if they did, like, just how people would react to that. All right.
Sorry, I do have a question. Sorry. I don't know. So in chapter 9 of Ryan Anderson's book, he talks about how one of the things that he said that we need to do is to call the court's ruling of the Same-Sex Marriage Act what it is judicial activism. What does that even mean? What is judicial activism?
Courts don't make law. Courts interpret law. They can say whether something is legal or illegal and what a punishment is for something being legal or illegal. Just because they declare something legal or illegal does not create a law, which then automatically takes place. Roe v. Wade, obviously you're familiar with. Another one is the search and seizure. All right. Fourth Amendment says unlawful search and seizure, but the Supreme Court, through court decisions, has determined to what extent it's considered unlawful for an officer to come in and search your property without reasonable suspicion, probable cause, or without you being arrested. When the Supreme Court makes a decision like that, they're only saying we're not going to accept when something like this happens, so therefore it controls how we act in relation to that. Like I said, if the court were to say you can't search anybody unless you catch them in the commission of a crime, then I would not be able to take action as a police officer when I was going out and doing something. In the same way, the Supreme Court deciding that something is legal or illegal based on something being presented to them because of the way something happened, that's a judicial decision. A different court could rule a different way. You know, if you had and I don't want to say, let's say earthquake, typhoon, nuclear bomb, whatever, go off, and 4 of the 7 chief justices were to die, and we were to get 4 new ones, they could rule entirely differently on the exact same law because they're the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is the highest court in the land, and they get to make decisions as to what we do and how we do it, but only in the matter of whether or not they're going to accept something for prosecution. It doesn't change what the law is, and it doesn't create law. It creates an interpretation of the law and how they're going to apply it. Is that too confusing?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, thanks for explaining that. I was trying to figure out what in the world he meant
Okay.
by that. So yeah, perfect. Thank you.
It's actually something they really shouldn't be doing. I was asking my husband the same thing when I was reading it. I'm like, what does that mean, judicial activism? So, like, they really shouldn't be doing it. They should only be interpreting the law rather than trying to legislate from the bench.
Gotcha. Perfect. Thank you.
All right. So next question, do you think people will ever realize that the breakdown of the family will cause the breakdown of society?
Yes. But it will be right before the second coming.
Yeah, I was going to say, probably not until it's like way too late.
That's exactly what I wrote down too.
Yeah, just because the way that our society, just no one really values it. So,
So everybody standing outside Noah's Ark didn't start to complain until the water was getting up to here. You know, yeah, they'll realize eventually, but it probably is going to be too late.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's how I was actually reading in the Book of Mormon this morning. It was right after, at the end of Alma or the beginning of Helaman, when the Lamanites were just being destroyed, and some of them were starting to convert. And the Nephites were also like becoming more wicked. And then anyway, they finally realized, oh, we aren't obeying the laws anymore. We're not doing what the Lord wants us to do. We're in trouble. He's not protecting us anymore. And I think that people are going to realize that they've become a godless society, and He's not going to support them in that. But it will be too late, like you said.
Yeah. All right. What sort of society will the next generation live in?
I feel like the society that the next generation will live in is a society that values the love between two people more than the protection and safety and the rights of children. Like we read it in the scriptures all the time, it's just going to get worse and worse until Christ comes. And we're going to see this push for same-sex marriage more and more until Christ comes, you know.
Yeah. I would almost label it as, and maybe I'm not right, but almost a selfish society, just because it's all about like what I want and what benefits me and what, helps me out more than what helps our society out.
Take it to the next level as well. I mean, what stops the people who are talking about marriage to anybody or anybody they want to, regardless of anything? How do we then not start applying that to age? Where do we take into account that in the 1400s, girls were married off at 13, but now we say they need to be 18. So who's going to attack that next? Or who's going to attack? I mean, yeah. Sorry, I could go on and on about all the what ifs, but our children and our children's children are going to be raised in a society where they're going to be assaulted on all fronts of people who are claiming that this is the way it should be, and they're going to have to realize and remember and hold themselves to a higher standard, that even though it's not illegal or it's not against the law to do all these different things, I'm not going to choose to do them, because by doing these other things, I'm following a higher law than the law of the land.
I think along with that, with Andre and Chloe and Emily, I feel like as time goes on, I feel like our society will be more and more segregated. Like I think that especially once Trump was elected, like our society has become so not unified, whatever a word is for that. Like it's just there's just such a
polarized,
very polarized. And I feel like it's just, as time goes on, the next generation is going to be even more polarized and less unified, where I feel like it's going to be impossible to have like a really unified country, have a united states, because I don't feel like the people are going to be united at all because of the different views.
Right. What did you read from chapter 9 that gave you hope for the future?
What gave me hope from reading that chapter is kind of that we do have a voice and we can use it. Like, we can advocate for the things we feel are right. And even at the very beginning of the chapter, I think it said that several states acted to protect religious liberty and the rights of their citizens. So I found that kind of comforting, that although it's being attacked a lot of states have tried to protect that still.
Right now, I feel like the majority of people, the voice of reason or the voice of Christianity are kind of being overridden by the loud minority. It's not really the majority yet, but if we keep letting them be louder and louder and louder, they're going to become the majority, and then we're in trouble. Worse than we are. But I think right now, like what the Supreme Court did with, is it Ogerbell? I can't ever say it right. But that decision, that really went against what states had voted for themselves, for their state. Because a lot of states, was it Ryan Anderson we watched a few weeks ago that was saying like 31 states had wanted that in their constitution, that marriage is between a man and a woman. And the Supreme Court just took away that states' rights, basically. So I think it's not hopeless yet. We can still make a difference if we become loud, but that's the problem. Reasonable people aren't as loud as unreasonable people.
It's true. I know in times where it's the most crucial for me to speak up, I don't want to. So that's something that this class has really, I don't know, made me remember that like I have to speak up about the things that I care about. Otherwise, I'm just as much part of the problem, because it's not like I'm doing anything to help it out. So. All right. What action points from chapter 9, The Long View, did you feel you can personally do?
So on Saturday, Elder Rasband came to our area and talked to the young marrieds. And so anyway, we went to this devotional and he talked for probably close to an hour. And right when he started talking, he immediately used the word to advocate for religious freedom and for families. And it, like, especially with this class, I was like, oh my goodness, like this is something that the proclamation doesn't just talk about, but this is something that like the Quorum of the 12 and the First Presidency want us to be able to advocate for families and for society and for religious freedom. He said that I hope that some of you are going into government and public policy, or that some of you will be involved in the PTA, like be involved in the communities to help support families. And that just kind of like gave me hope that these brethren have hope and trust in us to be able to make a difference into our communities. I feel like one thing that's been hard with Ryan Anderson's book, because he is so good with words and I am so not, that it just makes me nervous to like speak up with things like that. But like being on a PTA board or something, being involved in a school or donating some of my time for like a family crisis center or something like that, like that's something that I can easily do. And so just like hearing Elder Rasband talk and giving some suggestions of what we can do as like little itty bitty nobodies in the community to help promote and help sustain children and families was really encouraging to me. And so I feel like between just a few of the things that Ryan Anderson talked about in his book, where it talks about like being an advocate for marriage and what we believe marriage is, and then just advocating in the community a little bit more. From Elder Rasband, that was like really empowering to me this week.
I think what Emily said ties really well into the second action point that I mentioned about how we must protect our freedom to speak and live according to the truth about marriage. So not only being willing to speak, but also act accordingly too. Makes me think like faith without works is dead. So we must speak it, but also be an example of showing that too.
Yeah. All right. Anything else before I move on to the next question? All right. So how can we improve ourselves and others by a wise use of our time?
We talk about this all the time with our kids. We talk about this all the time at church. We talk about it, you know, we hear about it from our apostles. We hear about it from our prophet, and we hear about it from the scriptures, you know, that we should be actively engaged in good causes. When we fritter away our time, we just kind of do nothing with it. You know, at the end of the day, you're like, what did I accomplish today? You know, did I do any good? Did I do anything good for somebody? You know, and I've got the cover on my phone. I probably can't read it, but it's the lock screen. It says that if it is important to you, you will find a way. If it's not, you'll find an excuse. And my wife has one that she made out of an old window shutter board that she painted and calligraphied on. And it says, "Hun, read it to me. You always have time for the things you put first." And the simple fact, if we put our, no, don't eat that. That's from yesterday. If we put our, great parenting over here. If we put the important things first, you know, we put our family first, we put our kids first, we put our relationships first. It frustrates me to no end to see people who I know go to work 40 hours a week, 50 hours a week, 60 hours a week, and are never late to work, show up 10 minutes late to church. It drives me insane. You know, I learned at my dad's knee that early is on time and on time is late. And I'm not saying stuff doesn't happen. I'm not saying life doesn't happen. But when it's important to us to be at church, or it's important to us to go and serve others or to be there for others, we're going to be there for others regardless of what else is going on. And I can remember, I mean, and this whole lesson this week, everything, all the different readings reminded me of, and all of a sudden I'm blanking on the name, but it's the planner books that the guy who made them was a member of the church. And
Franklin Covey.
Thank you, Covey, Franklin Covey. And that I took a class once where they talked about his concept of how to do things. And you guys may all be familiar with this already, but he breaks down our lives into 4 blocks, you know, and we draw a square on the screen and we divide it with a cross in the middle of it. So we have a box labeled 1 and a box labeled 2 and a box labeled 3 and a box labeled 4. And on the left side, the 2 left boxes are things that are urgent. And on the right side of the box are things that are important. So box number 1 is something that's urgent and important. Box number 2 is something that's not urgent but important. Box number 3 is something that's urgent but not important. And box number 4 is something that's not urgent and not important. And he was teaching us, or he was telling us, that we needed to take everything in our lives and we needed to put it into these 4 boxes. And your phone ringing, somebody knocking at your door, that's urgent. That requires a response. But is it necessarily important? If you're expecting a package to be delivered for a Christmas birthday, then maybe somebody knocking at the door is urgent and important. But if you're not expecting anything and you're in the middle of, bathing a child or feeding a kid or working on homework with somebody, maybe you don't need to answer that urgency because the non-urgent important thing takes precedence.